Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a topic that might make you a little squeamish, but in the best way possible. Imagine for a moment that you're living in the medieval era. You've got a few things on your plate: surviving harsh winters, dodging plague outbreaks, and trying to figure out how to make a living in a world full of uncertainty. But one thing everyone seems to be obsessed with is love. But not just any love, the kind that can be magically manipulated. That's right. Medieval people were all about love spells, and these weren't just a few sweet words whispered under a full moon. No, no. These love spells were often downright creepy, not to mention dangerous. You probably wouldn't survive a single attempt to cast one, but that didn't stop people from trying. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, feel free to post your location and the time where you're tuning in from tonight. I'm always curious where people are hanging out while we journey through these fascinating stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Love magic. The idea of casting a spell to make someone fall in love with you might sound a bit silly, right? But back in medieval times, it was deadly serious. If you wanted to make your crush notice you, or even win the affection of a ruler, you wouldn't just write them a letter or try to impress them with your cooking. Oh no, you'd go to a local wise woman, or maybe an apothecary, and ask them for something far more potent, a love spell. But these weren't cute little incantations with hearts and roses. These were dark, complicated, and sometimes downright eerie rituals that involved strange ingredients and incantations. At the heart of this belief in love spells was the medieval understanding of magic itself. Magic wasn't something only witches and sorcerers dabbled in. It was an essential part of life. Love, in particular, was something seen as easily manipulated by forces outside of human control. So why not use magic to control it? In fact, many believe that magic could sway the hearts of others or make someone's emotions align perfectly with your desires. But there was a catch, of course. If you didn't do it just right, there were some seriously creepy and often dangerous consequences. One of the most common ingredients in love spells? Hair. It might seem like a harmless thing to pluck a few strands from your head or someone else's, but in medieval magic, hair was considered a powerful conduit for a person's soul or spirit. A bit of your hair could allegedly be used to manipulate your emotions or those of another. But imagine this. It wasn't only your own hair you needed. You had to gather someone else's hair, usually the person you wanted to fall in love with you. And if you didn't have that, you'd be out of luck. A real missing piece of the puzzle situation, right? And sometimes it wasn't just hair. The most desperate would go as far as taking things like fingernail clippings or even bodily fluids. It was a bit too much, if you ask me. And speaking of body fluids, let's talk about a slightly more shocking example from history. If you were truly determined to make someone love you, you might have to turn to something even more bizarre: menstrual blood. Yes, this was seen as a powerful substance in medieval love magic. Some believed that by consuming menstrual blood, you could bind someone's heart to yours forever. It's hard not to laugh or cringe at the thought of it. But this was seriously part of the cultural belief system at the time. It wasn't just a quirky superstition, it was real for people, backed by centuries of tradition. Historians still argue whether these practices were as widespread as they appear in written texts. But one thing's for sure, love spells were deeply embedded in the everyday lives of medieval people. And it wasn't just for those who were desperate for love. Even the powerful used these spells. Some royal figures believed that magic could not only enhance their love lives, but could give them an advantage in political marriages or courtly affairs. Magic was, for all intents and purposes, another weapon in the arsenal of social manipulation. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This is all sounding pretty outlandish, but let's dive deeper, shall we? When we think of spells today, we tend to imagine something along the lines of bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, cute, Disney-esque magic. However, medieval spells were much more menacing. These spells weren't simply whispered in a quiet corner of the woods. They were often cast in public places, like churches, marketplaces, or even at royal courts. They were part of daily life, wrapped in superstition and religion, and many were closely tied to pagan practices that had been around for centuries before the rise of Christianity. So, imagine the scene. You're in the bustling market square of a medieval town, strolling past vendors selling bread and meat, when you spot someone who catches your eye. They're striking, confident, the perfect match for you. But how do you get them to notice you? Maybe you take a quick trip to the local apothecary. You ask the wise woman there for something, a potion, a powder, perhaps a talisman that will make them fall in love with you. The woman, with her knowing smile, gives you a little pouch of dried herbs, which she claims will guarantee success. Or maybe she hands you a vial of love oil to anoint yourself with. You walk away, heart racing, already envisioning your future together. But here's the thing, once you start meddling with magic, you're no longer in control. The power you summon has a way of turning against you, and the line between love and obsession gets incredibly thin. There were countless stories from history of people casting spells that didn't turn out the way they'd hoped. People became so obsessed with making someone love them that they became obsessed with controlling that person's emotions. And that's where things started to get creepy. Historians still debate the true extent of the consequences of these love spells, but one thing is certain, the risks were very real. People were not just playing with magic, they were playing with human lives and emotions. When you used magic to manipulate someone's will, you risked crossing boundaries that could have dangerous repercussions, both for the spellcaster and the person being targeted. There's something undeniably fascinating about the medieval obsession with love spells, isn't there? It's as if the very idea of controlling human desire wasn't just a pursuit for the desperate. It was woven into the fabric of society itself. But before we go deeper into how these spells worked, let's pause for a moment and look at what medieval people really believed about love. For them, love wasn't just an emotion or a fleeting attraction. Oh no. Love was an all-encompassing force, sometimes even regarded as an illness. And when love was involved, you were not in control. That's where magic came in. In the medieval mindset, love was a powerful force that could easily overpower the body and mind. It wasn't always considered a good thing either. You see, falling in love could make you weak, irrational, and out of control. In fact, there was an entire genre of literature called courtly love, and while it sounded romantic on the surface, it was anything but. Courtly love, with all its rituals and rules, often led to obsessive behaviors that could be destructive, especially when someone's heart wasn't returned. And that's where magic was supposed to help. If you weren't lucky enough to fall in love in the traditional way, by meeting someone naturally and having those butterflies in your stomach, you could take matters into your own hands. Magic, in all its strange forms, was the ultimate solution to an unrequited love or an unconsummated relationship. The idea was simple. You could influence someone's heart, mind, or even soul. But in practice, it was far more complicated and far more dangerous. But let's rewind for a second and look at the world these medieval folks lived in. The role of magic was not quite like it is today, where we tend to see it in movies or fantasy books. Magic, particularly love magic, wasn't just something people believed in. It was part of their daily reality. You could walk down any street and see signs for herbalists or wise women, whose magic wasn't simply a curious practice, it was a necessary service. If you wanted someone to love you or stay in your life forever, you turned to these individuals for help. They were highly respected and sometimes feared for their power to change the course of destiny. And people paid good money for their services. Now, let's take a look at the creepy ingredients often found in these love spells. Imagine this. You're walking into a dimly lit apothecary shop, surrounded by jars filled with strange dried herbs and vials of mysterious liquids. The air smells faintly of incense and something else. Something a bit off. You approach the counter, where the old woman behind it gives you a knowing smile. You ask for something to make your true love fall for you. She doesn't hesitate. She hands you a bundle of dried rosemary, said to make anyone fall in love with you, and a tiny vial filled with the essence of lavender and rose petals, which, when mixed with your own blood, would create an irresistible potion. It might sound like something out of a fairy tale, but these were the types of things people relied on. And that's where it got a little disturbing. Sometimes, the ingredients in love spells were more gruesome than a handful of flowers. Animal parts, human hair, and even the ashes of burnt candles were thought to carry potent magical properties. But it wasn't just about ingredients. The rituals surrounding these spells were also quite eerie. You might need to light candles at midnight, chant incantations in forgotten languages, or even carve symbols into your own flesh. It was all part of the process, and it was believed that only by following these rituals precisely could you guarantee success. But while these rituals may have seemed like harmless superstition to outsiders, they were taken very seriously by those performing them. And the stakes were high. If the spell didn't work, the person who cast it might feel humiliated, like a failure who couldn't even manage to make love magic work. And worst of all, there were people who truly believed that love spells, when cast incorrectly, could curse both the spellcaster and the person they intended to charm. If someone had used a love spell in a selfish or greedy way, it was believed that the spell would backfire, causing immense heartbreak and misfortune. Historians still debate whether medieval love magic truly had a lasting impact on relationships, or if it was simply a form of escape for those trapped in an unforgiving society. But there are countless documented cases of people claiming that love spells saved marriages, turned unrequited love into passion, or even convinced someone to betray their vows for the sake of a forbidden affair. These accounts were often by those who were convinced of the spell's power, though it's likely that many of these stories were fueled by personal desire and embellishment. Still, they show the degree to which people were willing to go to manipulate emotions. One historical figure who might have dabbled in love magic was none other than the famous Eleanor of Aquitaine, the powerful queen who ruled both England and France in the 12th century. Eleanor had a reputation for attracting powerful suitors, including Henry II of England. But there are hints in some accounts that she may have used magic to secure her relationships, particularly when it came to gaining political advantages through marriage. Whether or not she ever truly cast spells remains up for debate, but the fact that people believe she did tells us a lot about the climate of the time. Magic was everywhere, and it was used by some of the most influential figures in history. But it wasn't just royalty or noblewomen who used love spells. If you were a commoner, you too could access these services, though you might have to scrape together a bit more money. And what were the risks for people who didn't go to a reputable source? Well, things could get out of hand fast. Some people reportedly used love magic to create powerful bonds with their lovers, or even to force others into relationships they didn't want. The desire for control over love led to dangerous outcomes, particularly when people attempted to force love against another person's will. At the heart of it all, though, was a fundamental belief that love itself was a force beyond human understanding. It was unpredictable, uncontrollable, and often a source of great frustration. But with a bit of magic and a few well-placed incantations, you could bend the force of love to your will. By now, you're probably wondering, how far were people really willing to go to make someone love them? Well, let's just say that, in the medieval world, it wasn't just about lighting a few candles and waiting for fate to take its course. Oh no, when it came to love spells, people were ready to do some serious things to get their crush to fall head over heels for them. But before we dive into the odd and eerie rituals, let's take a moment to explore the role of the church in all of this. You might think that the church, with its strict teachings and moral codes, would be firmly against the practice of love magic, and for the most part, it was. The church condemned magic as sinful and associated it with witchcraft, which was considered heresy. But here's where it gets interesting. While the church publicly denounced love magic, it didn't completely erase its influence from medieval society. In fact, it had a bit of a double standard. On the one hand, the church preached that love was a sacred bond ordained by God, and that using magic to manipulate it was sinful. But on the other hand, there were many religious figures who quietly acknowledged the power of magic and the role it played in people's lives. Even some priests, monks, and nuns were known to secretly dabble in magical practices, including love spells. You see, The medieval world wasn't as black and white as we might think. The distinction between good and evil wasn't always clear, and even the most devout Christians couldn't entirely avoid the allure of magic when it came to matters of the heart. And if you needed any proof that love magic wasn't just reserved for peasants and the lower classes, look no further than the royal courts. If you've ever seen the lavish courts of medieval Europe depicted in movies, you probably imagine love as a grand, chivalrous affair. But love in those courts was often a strategic maneuver, a political tool used to secure power, alliances, and even wealth. And for that, magic wasn't just a convenience, it was a necessity. Royalty knew that the right marriage could change the entire course of history, and sometimes love spells were just the thing to make sure that the union went in their favor. One particularly famous story of royal love magic comes from the court of King Henry II of England and his queen, Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor, already a powerful and influential figure in her own right, had a reputation for being headstrong and fiercely independent. As you can imagine, her relationships weren't always smooth sailing, especially when it came to her marriage. It's rumored that Eleanor turned to a bit of love magic to help secure her relationship with Henry, particularly when their relationship started to fray. In a court filled with political intrigue, betrayal, and shifting alliances, magic may have been just the trick to keep things from falling apart. Did she actually perform love spells? Historians still debate this, but the very fact that such rumors persisted shows just how ingrained the idea of magical manipulation was in the elite circles. And let's not forget, Eleanor's powerful influence wasn't just limited to her love life. Magic was often used by royalty as a means of maintaining control over their subjects. In this sense, love spells weren't only about the personal emotions of the ruler, they were about shaping the power dynamics of the entire kingdom. This was particularly true in the case of royal marriages. Think of it like an emotional chess game, where the stakes were nothing less than the future of nations. If magic could seal the deal and ensure a politically advantageous marriage, well, why not use it? For common folk, though, the world of love magic was a bit less grand, but still just as compelling. Imagine you're a young woman in a small village, desperately in love with a man who doesn't even know you exist. You've tried all the usual ways to get his attention, dressing well, making sure to be near him at every opportunity, but nothing seems to work. That's when you hear about a local woman, known to have some unusual gifts, who can help you. She might sell you a potion or a charm to wear, promising to make him fall in love with you. It's tempting, right? The idea that there's a shortcut to love, a way to bypass all the awkwardness and uncertainty of real human interaction. And so, you might find yourself at her door, clutching a few coins and hoping she'll be able to make your dreams come true. But love magic wasn't all about attraction and sweet romance. There was another, darker side to it. Magic wasn't just used to make people fall in love, it was also used to maintain control over existing relationships, especially in marriages. In a society where divorce was rare and sometimes impossible, people would use spells to either bind their partners to them or force them to remain loyal. This wasn't just about creating passion, it was about maintaining power over another person's heart. Some love spells were actually intended to trap a lover, preventing them from straying or falling out of love. And this is where things get a little creepy. One of the most chilling forms of love magic involved what was known as binding spells. These were rituals designed to tie someone's will to the person performing the spell, essentially creating an unbreakable bond. It wasn't just about making someone like you, it was about ensuring that they would never leave you, no matter what. Some binding spells involve creating intricate knots or braiding hair, symbolizing the way that love, once bound, could never be undone. It's hard to imagine how unsettling it must have felt to be on the receiving end of one of these spells, knowing that someone's desire for you was manipulated by magical forces beyond your control. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of these binding rituals, with some suggesting that they were merely a form of psychological manipulation, using superstition to control the actions of others. But whether or not the magic truly had any power, the fear of it was very real. People lived in constant anxiety that their marriages or relationships might be subject to magical influence, and for some, that fear was just as powerful as any spell. The line between devotion and obsession was dangerously thin in the medieval world, and love magic only served to blur that line even further. For some, magic was a harmless tool to guide fate. For others, it was a terrifying force that could shatter lives and change destinies forever. Now, let's take a closer look at some of the more eerie rituals people performed to cast their love spells. These were no simple acts of wishful thinking. Medieval love magic often required full-on ceremonies, some performed in secret, others in plain view, complete with bizarre incantations and strange rituals that seemed like something straight out of a horror story. If you were someone hoping to secure a lover or manipulate someone's heart, you had to go all in. Nothing could be left to chance. One of the most fascinating and unsettling rituals involved the use of candles, specifically red candles. Red was the color of passion, love, and, well, lust, making it the perfect ingredient for a love spell. The process was simple in theory. You'd carve the name of your desired lover into the candle and then light it, reciting a series of powerful ancient words to ensure that your love would be returned. Sounds innocent enough, right? But the catch was that you had to burn the candle down completely, and while it burned, you were expected to perform certain acts, not just sitting quietly and waiting for magic to happen, but engaging in the ritual, focusing all your energy on the one you wish to seduce or bind to you. Many people believe that as the candle melted away, it would melt the heart of the person you desired, drawing them in. But this wasn't just any candle magic. It was also tied to the lunar calendar. You see, the medieval world was obsessed with aligning magic to celestial movements, particularly the phases of the moon. The moon's cycle was believed to have a profound influence on love and attraction, and certain phases were thought to amplify the effects of love spells. If you timed your spell to the waxing moon, for instance, it was believed that your love would grow steadily and become stronger. But if you performed it during the waning moon, it was said that the magic would fade just as quickly as it appeared. The idea of aligning yourself with the natural world and the stars was something that connected people to a broader, almost cosmic sense of fate. They were not merely using spells, they were in sync with the very forces of the universe itself. But there were also more, intimate and peculiar rituals. Some spells required the casting of enchanted objects, like personal items from the person you wish to manipulate. A lock of hair or a piece of clothing were believed to hold the power to sway someone's emotions. In one particularly strange ritual, a person might bury a piece of their lover's clothing at a crossroads, waiting for the magical forces to draw them closer. This idea of burying things was tied to the belief that the earth could hold the magic and bind someone's heart as it held the buried object. It was as if nature itself was working with the caster to weave an unbreakable bond. Of course, the very idea of using a personal item, something that had touched someone else's skin, to manipulate their emotions seems almost like a violation of privacy. But for medieval people, it was an accepted, albeit creepy, practice. Another chilling practice involved what were called love knots. These weren't just cute little pieces of embroidery or jewelry. These were complex knots, made from thread, hair, or even animal sinew, and they were used in spells to symbolically bind the hearts of two people together. You might make one knot for yourself and one for your lover, tying them together and hoping that as the knots tightened, so too would your connection. There were various methods of making these knots, some more elaborate than others, but the goal was always the same: to create a literal and figurative bond between you and your desired partner. The idea of being so desperate to bind another person's heart to you that you'd create a literal knot out of something as personal as their hair or clothing is a bit unsettling, isn't it? The worst part, though, if the spell didn't work, or if the intended lover didn't return the feelings, people would often turn to darker magic to make it work. In the worst cases, love magic was used to enslave another person's will. People would perform rituals that not only bound a person's heart, but also controlled their actions, making it so that the individual had no choice but to remain in the relationship. whether they wanted to or not. The line between love and obsession was razor thin, and the consequences of forcing someone's affections were devastating. Imagine being caught in a love spell like that, trapped in a relationship that you never consented to, unable to escape the hold of magic. The fear of this kind of emotional entrapment was a very real concern in medieval society. Some people even turned to what were known as charm stones or love charms, believing that these objects could ward off unwanted spells or undo the influence of a binding spell. These charms were worn as talismans to protect individuals from the dark magic of manipulation, offering a kind of insurance against unwanted affection. But the presence of these charms also highlighted the fear and distrust people had about love magic in general. It was a constant game of power, control, and vulnerability. The dark side of love magic didn't end with just the manipulation of emotions. It often involved vengeance. If you found yourself spurned or betrayed in love, it wasn't uncommon for people to use magic as a way to get back at those who had hurt them. In some cases, revenge spells were used to make an ex-lover suffer the same heartbreak that they had caused. These spells could range from simple curses to much more complicated rituals that aimed to break the spirit of the other person. The idea was that by performing a spell to break someone's heart, you could somehow regain your own sense of power and justice. It wasn't about making someone fall in love with you anymore. It was about making them feel the pain of lost affection. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of such vengeful spells was common or if it was mostly a product of folklore. But regardless of how often they were used, the very idea that love magic could go from something sweet and hopeful to something dark and punishing is chilling. It's a reminder of how deeply people were willing to go in their desperation to manipulate the hearts of others, and how easily love magic could turn from a tool of desire into an instrument of control and retribution. At this point, you may be wondering, if these love spells were so dark, why did people keep using them? Why did they persist, even with the clear risks and eerie rituals involved? The answer lies in the very nature of love itself and how medieval society viewed it. Love wasn't just an emotion, it was the key to survival, the driving force behind political power, and often the foundation of social status. If you couldn't control love, you couldn't control your life, and in a world that already seemed out of control, many turned to magic to give them the upper hand. For those at the lower end of the social ladder, the idea of using magic to secure a partner or find affection wasn't just about personal desire. It was about securing a place in a world that was brutally indifferent to their suffering. In medieval Europe, where poverty and illness were rampant, a good marriage could elevate your status, provide you with resources, and ensure a future that wasn't filled with back-breaking labor. That's why a magic spell to catch someone's eye could be seen as not just a romantic endeavor, but a crucial survival tactic. But let's pause and take a moment to appreciate the twisted ingenuity behind these spells. Imagine you're a noblewoman trying to secure the affection of a king or prince, perhaps to maintain your own position or advance your family's power. What better way to make sure that love is guaranteed than through the use of magic? Many people, royals and commoners alike, believed that love could be forced, that they could make another person fall in love with them using a carefully crafted charm or ritual. And for those who were already in power, magic wasn't just about finding love. It was about controlling it, ensuring that their lover stayed loyal or never strayed. And let's not forget the power of obsession. In medieval society, obsession wasn't just romantic, it was a tool. If you could make someone obsess over you, you could manipulate them into doing almost anything you wanted. We saw it in the courtly love traditions, where knights would often go to extreme lengths to win the affections of noblewomen. The intensity of these emotions was almost encouraged. The idea was that if you truly love someone, your actions should be extreme, even obsessive. Magic was just one more way to feed that obsession, to transform desire into control. Some historians speculate that the constant use of love magic in the medieval period was in part a reflection of the instability of the time. People lived in fear of invasions, famines, and disease, so trying to control their most intimate relationships through magic gave them a sense of power in an otherwise uncertain world. The real tragedy, though, is that magic itself wasn't a guarantee of success. Sure, you could cast the spell, say the words, and create the potion, but in the end, there was no true control over how the heart works. People could still reject you, and when that happened, the consequences were often severe. Perhaps the most interesting part of all this is the fact that love magic often crossed over into the realm of religion and spirituality. While the church publicly denounced magic, the fact that people still sought it out and used it suggests that they were still deeply spiritual. They were seeking a higher force, something beyond their human reach, to intervene in their love lives. It wasn't just about superstition or simple trickery. It was about invoking divine power, whether in the form of saints, angels, or even ancient deities. People didn't always trust the church to handle their love lives, so they turned to older, more pagan rituals to get what they wanted. For example, in some parts of medieval Europe, people would turn to ancient pagan rituals that involved invoking gods and goddesses of love, fertility, and desire. These rituals were often performed at sacred sites or under the cover of night, where the darkness could provide a sense of secrecy and mysticism. The rituals might include offerings of food, wine, and even sacrifices to appease these deities in hopes of gaining their favor. These practices were seen as not only magical, but sacred, as if love itself were a divine force that could be bent to your will. But as you might imagine, love magic wasn't without its ethical concerns. Even in a world where magic was accepted as part of daily life, there were still lines that couldn't be crossed. The ethics of using magic to manipulate someone's heart was, and still is, debated. Some believe that love should be freely given, not forced or coerced by external powers. Others felt that if love was truly meant to be, then magic would align with that love and bring about a natural connection. But for those who were desperate enough, there was no such thing as too far. Magic was just another tool to get what they wanted. Historians still argue whether the widespread belief in love magic influenced actual societal behavior, or if it was simply a product of the imagination. Some theorize that these spells were more symbolic than functional, ways of expressing desire in a society that wasn't open about emotions. But even if love magic didn't have real, tangible power, the belief in its power was enough to shape relationships, marriages, and even entire kingdoms. Interestingly, while most people focused on love magic in the context of romantic relationships, there were also spells used to influence the love of family members or friends. For instance, some people sought out magic to make their parents love them more, to increase their social standing, or even to ensure that a friend would never betray them. The idea that love was malleable, something that could be influenced by external forces, was ingrained in the medieval mind. If you could use magic to influence a lover, why couldn't you use it to influence everyone around you? This, of course, led to some troubling consequences. Love spells weren't just about making people love you. They could also be about manipulating, controlling, and coercing the people in your life. And once that manipulation started, it was hard to stop. The nature of love magic blurred the lines between affection and possession. It wasn't just about making someone love you, it was about making them need you. As we venture deeper into the world of medieval love spells, it's clear that the magic was often used not just to bring two hearts together, but to keep them tethered in ways that could feel almost suffocating. For many, love spells represented an attempt to seize control over their own emotional lives in a world that offered little certainty. They were more than just romantic gestures. They were tools of survival, power, and protection in a time when everything from wealth to family status was at the mercy of human relationships. But let's take a step back and look at some of the more peculiar and frankly bizarre methods people use to cast their love spells. We've already mentioned hair and body fluids, but there was one ingredient that seems almost comically strange today: crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Crocodile dung, along with other animal excrements, was sometimes used in love magic, believed to have potent powers in ancient and medieval magic. The idea was that these potent substances held the life force of the animal, making them powerful enough to influence human emotions. Now imagine standing in front of an apothecary's stall, contemplating a small bundle of crocodile dung. The vendor's assurance that this tiny packet could help make your lover fall deeply in love with you probably didn't make the product seem too appealing. But in a time when nothing was as simple as a cup of coffee and a sweet conversation, people were willing to try anything. Other less extreme, but still odd ingredients in love spells included things like saffron, honey, and the bones of a beloved pet. Some rituals also included precious stones, stones believed to carry the emotional power of the earth itself, acting as catalysts for romance. It's hard to imagine just how unsettling these rituals must have been for those who were caught in their web. Take, for instance, the use of hair spells. To effectively cast a love spell, it was believed that not only your own hair, but also your lover's hair, or a piece of it, was necessary. The way this worked was simple. Once the hair was collected, it was twisted or braided into knots, forming a symbolic binding between you and the other person. This was believed to tie the hearts together, making the lover's emotions align with the desires of the spellcaster. And if the hair wasn't enough, there were the waxy rituals. Picture yourself sitting in a candlelit room, surrounded by the rich scent of melting wax. A figure in the dark prepares to melt a wax effigy, the figure of your desired lover. By doing so, it was believed that you could literally melt the heart of the object of your affection, forging a connection that would bind the two of you together. The idea was that the transformation of the wax, as it melted and reformed, mirrored the transformation in the lover's heart. It was as if you were literally manipulating not only the person's feelings, but their very being. But what if that wax didn't work? What if, despite all your efforts, you were still struggling to make someone notice you? That's when the truly sinister side of medieval love magic came into play, the use of curses. Love curses weren't just an accidental side effect of poorly cast spells. No, some people intentionally cast curses to break or control another's heart. These curses were often aimed at a lover who had rejected the spellcaster. After all, love isn't always returned, and when people didn't get what they wanted, they could turn from love spells to revenge spells. One of the most well-known curses involved the use of hair, nails, and saliva. The idea was to gather these items from the one you wish to control and then place them in a hidden spot, like under the floorboards of a house, in a graveyard, or within a well. Once these personal items were buried in a place where the elements could contain the spell, the heart of the person in question would be bound to the caster's will. The cruelty of these spells was shocking, and what was even more frightening was the fact that many people believed that these curses would last forever, permanently altering the course of relationships and lives. Historians have often speculated that the use of these darker spells was linked to the feelings of powerlessness people experienced in the medieval world. Life was tough. Famine, disease, and war were ever present. Magic provided an escape, a way to feel in control of one's fate, particularly in love. If you didn't have wealth, you could gain affection with magic. If you didn't have beauty, you could use witchcraft to win someone's heart. And if someone hurt you, magic gave you the power to hurt them back. But the use of love curses and manipulative spells wasn't just about personal frustration. It was also tied to the fear of losing control. In a time when most relationships were either politically or economically motivated, love magic allowed people to maintain the upper hand, to ensure that a partner or suitor remained under their influence. This, of course, led to dangerous power dynamics. Many people had to live with the knowledge that their partner's love may not have been entirely free, that it may have been the result of a spell, or worse, a curse. This was a world in which desire and control were tangled together in a way that's difficult to imagine today. And the power of a love spell was often seen as a way to balance out the inequalities of life. Powerless peasants could use spells to gain the affection of someone from a higher class. Poor women might use magic to secure a wealthy marriage or to gain the affection of a man who otherwise wouldn't have given them a second glance. In these moments, love was as much about survival as it was about connection. Even so, it's clear that love magic was dangerous. Too dangerous, perhaps. The consequences of manipulation weren't always immediate, but they were certainly long-lasting. People didn't just risk their reputations by using these spells, they risked their very souls. A love spell wasn't just a way to win someone's heart, it was a way to warp a person's will, to make them your own, in a world where hearts were as vulnerable as anything else. As we sit here today, with our relatively easy access to love and relationships, it's hard to fathom just how far people in the medieval era went to control their emotional destinies. But those desperate, sometimes tragic attempts to create love and bind hearts together were as much a part of the medieval world as the castles and kingdoms that are often the focus of our history books. It wasn't just about magic, it was about control, survival, and ultimately the desire for affection in a world that offered so little guarantee of it. As we continue our journey through the world of medieval love magic, it's important to take a moment to reflect on the broader cultural implications of these practices. Why did people resort to such extreme measures to capture the affection of another? What did it say about their views on love, relationships, and human nature? The truth is, these practices weren't just about personal gain. They were about trying to navigate a world where human relationships were precarious at best, and where a single misstep could determine your fate. In medieval society, the concept of romantic love was not what it is today. While we might think of love as something that should come naturally or be built over time, people in the medieval period often saw love as something that could be achieved through spells, rituals, and supernatural intervention. Marriage was often a practical affair, driven by political, economic, or social considerations, and love didn't necessarily play a central role. It was a necessity for survival, but not necessarily something that people expected to come easily. With that in mind, it's easy to see why people would have turned to magic as a means of achieving love. The very act of using magic to compel someone to fall in love with you was, in some ways, an admission of the limitations of natural affection. It was a recognition that love couldn't always be depended upon to follow its own course. When love was manipulated, when people sought it through magic, it was almost as if they were acknowledging that they didn't trust love to work in its own time, and so they took control. But by doing so, they were also risking the natural flow of things, throwing off the delicate balance of relationships. The obsession with controlling love through magic can also be traced to the widespread belief in fate. In medieval times, fate was often seen as a force beyond human control, something that could be either shaped by divine will or manipulated through supernatural means. A person's love life, much like their health, wealth, or social standing, was viewed as something that could be influenced by fate's whims. If love was part of this grand design, then surely it was possible to intervene and make it bend to your will, right? So what did these spells actually look like in practice? Well, beyond the bizarre ingredients like crocodile dung or human hair, many of these spells relied heavily on the power of words, specifically incantations that were believed to summon the forces of magic. These were not simple phrases or declarations of love. No, love spells required the use of ancient languages, prayers, and carefully crafted phrases to invoke powerful forces. These incantations, often whispered in secret, had to be precise. Any mistake and the spell would fail, or worse, backfire. One of the most famous types of incantations involved calling upon saints. Catholic saints, often revered for their perceived holiness and supernatural powers, were believed to have the ability to influence people's hearts. A woman might recite a prayer to Saint Anne, the patroness of women and mothers, asking her to help with matters of the heart. Or she might call upon Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of musicians, hoping that the harmony of love could be created through divine intervention. The fact that these spells often invoked religious figures reflects the duality of medieval magic. It was never purely about superstition. It was also deeply intertwined with the spiritual beliefs of the time. However, not everyone believed that saints could be relied upon for magical assistance. Some sought their magic from more esoteric pagan sources. These individuals turned to the ancient gods of love and fertility, like Aphrodite or Venus, hoping to invoke the forces of the divine feminine to aid in their romantic pursuits. These ancient gods had long been associated with passionate, unrestrained love, making them the perfect figures to invoke for such an intimate and often dangerous task. The blending of Christianity and paganism in medieval love magic is another fascinating aspect of the practice. While the church condemned magic as the work of demons, many of the rituals associated with love spells were a fusion of Christian and pre-Christian beliefs. This syncretism shows how medieval people often blurred the lines between what was officially acceptable and what was privately practiced. In many ways, love spells became a way of maintaining a connection to older, pre-Christian traditions, allowing people to access a kind of magic that felt more personal, more direct, and often more effective than the formal prayers of the church. Let's now look at another crucial aspect of love spells, the role of the object used to focus the spell's power. These objects could range from simple trinkets, like a ring or a piece of cloth, to more intricate items, like a carefully constructed doll made from wax or clay. These dolls, often referred to as poppets, were believed to represent the person the spellcaster wished to influence. To make a love spell more effective, the poppet would be dressed in clothing that resembled the target, and the spellcaster would use it to invoke the person's desires, essentially casting the spell upon them. The use of poppets also served as a kind of surrogate for the real person, offering a physical object through which the spellcaster could project their emotions. But while these objects were designed to bring about love, they could also serve a much darker purpose. Some people used poppets to harm others, using needles or pins to inflict pain or manipulate the emotions of someone who had wronged them. If a relationship soured or a lover was unfaithful, the poppet could be used to exact revenge or to force them to remain loyal. It was a way of ensuring that love, whether freely given or not, could be controlled. And for the spellcaster, there was a terrifying power in having the ability to manipulate another person's emotions, to hold their heart in your hands, even if that power was fleeting. Historians often wonder whether these spells, so ingrained in the medieval psyche, were a reflection of something deeper, something that went beyond magic itself. Perhaps love magic was a manifestation of the powerlessness people felt in the face of love. In a world where so much was beyond their control, magic offered a way to fight back. But at what cost? In attempting to control love, medieval people may have inadvertently created relationships that were hollow, fragile, and fraught with tension. What began as an attempt to create genuine affection often became an act of control, manipulation, or even vengeance. Love spells were not just about finding love. They were about wielding it as a tool for survival. As we dig deeper into the world of medieval love spells, the consequences of using such magic become clearer and darker. As we've seen, love magic wasn't just about creating affection. It was a method of seizing control over something that should, in theory, be a free and mutual bond. It wasn't about nurturing love. It was about manipulating it, bending it to your will, and sometimes the consequences were far from what anyone intended. Consider the concept of charmed love. We've already touched on how people used various methods, like poppets and wax effigies, to shape love into something desired. But these methods weren't foolproof. There were stories of people going through the rituals of love magic, doing everything correctly, only to find that their intended love didn't materialize. Or worse, they found themselves trapped in relationships that were not the romantic bliss they had hoped for. The magic worked, but not in the way they imagined. Some historians speculate that the magical thinking behind these love spells was a psychological coping mechanism, driven by the overwhelming anxiety and lack of control that permeated medieval life. In a society rife with disease, plague, and the constant threat of war, personal relationships were often one of the only things that people could truly seek control over. Magic gave people the illusion that they could shape their own destiny, bend another's heart to their desires, and even rewrite the course of their lives. But there's a catch, of course. As people sought to control love, they often created imbalances in their relationships. In some cases, the result was a toxic power dynamic. Imagine being bound to someone who loves you, but only because you forced their emotions. You would never know if they truly cared for you, or if their affection was the result of a spell cast years ago. For the person who was the target of these spells, life wasn't much better. Their love wasn't freely given. It was controlled, manipulated by forces outside their own will. In this sense, the love spells might not have been about creating genuine love at all. They were often about creating dependence. A love that is manipulated through magic isn't a partnership. It's a form of subjugation, even if it's subtle. The power dynamics at play in these relationships could be devastating, and they often led to heartbreak, betrayal, or the slow deterioration of what little trust remained. The fear of manipulation didn't stop with the spellcasters. It extended to the individuals who found themselves at the mercy of these spells. Imagine for a moment being the person who had no control over your own heart. Your emotions, your desires, your very affections, were they even your own, or were they the result of someone's magic? The anxiety that must have come with knowing that your heart could be manipulated would have been unbearable. It wasn't just a matter of rejecting someone's advances. It was a matter of wondering whether your own feelings were real or fabricated, forced upon you through arcane rituals. And let's not forget the legal and social consequences that could arise from these types of manipulative relationships. If a love spell succeeded, and the object of the spell did fall in love with the caster, there was always the risk that someone might discover the truth, that the relationship had been forced by magic. For people in positions of power or influence, especially those in the royal courts or noble families, this could spell disaster. A marriage or union formed through magic or any sort of manipulation could be seen as illegitimate or even morally corrupt. It wasn't just about personal heartbreak. It was about reputation, which in medieval society was everything. This fear of exposure was something that could haunt individuals who used love spells for personal gain, whether they were attempting to manipulate someone in their personal life or gain a political advantage. In a world where social standing was as fragile as glass, the stakes were incredibly high. If the truth came out that a royal marriage was based on magic, or that a high-ranking noble had used spells to secure a lover's affections, it could tarnish their reputation and make them the target of scandal. The fear of this potential disgrace was enough to make people careful about how far they were willing to go to manipulate the course of love. Moreover, many medieval people, especially those who practiced magic in secret, faced persecution when their spells went awry. The church, while tolerating some forms of magic, often condemned love spells as part of a broader agenda to root out any form of witchcraft or heresy. In some cases, love magic, especially when it involved the darker arts of binding or revenge, was seen as an affront to divine will. Those accused of practicing such spells were often put to trial, and in the most severe cases, executed for witchcraft. The very act of seeking to control love could become a dangerous game, one that could cost you your life. So what happened when things went wrong? History is filled with stories of people who, having used love magic, found themselves in situations they couldn't escape. People who found themselves in love with someone who was either not capable of loving them in return, or who had been manipulated into doing so. These love triangles, if you can call them that, became rife with jealousy, distrust, and resentment. If the spell was broken or reversed, or if the object of affection grew weary of their manipulated love, it could lead to some truly catastrophic situations. One of the most famous and tragic cases of love manipulation comes from the ancient world. Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt, was said to have used a combination of charm, beauty, and subtle magic to win over Julius Caesar, and later, Mark Antony. Whether or not she used actual love spells is a matter of debate, but many historians believe she understood the power of seduction and influence well enough to manipulate the hearts of these powerful men. In her case, love magic wasn't just about personal affection, it was about political control. She used her relationships with these Roman figures to secure Egypt's sovereignty and strengthen her own rule. But in the end, it wasn't love that saved her. It was her political savvy, and perhaps a bit of luck. Cleopatra's story might not have been purely about magic, but it highlights a recurring theme in the medieval love magic tradition. Love was a tool, something to be used to secure power, influence, and control over people's hearts. Whether through legitimate affection or manipulative magic, love had the potential to change the course of history. In the medieval period, though, the stakes were far higher for the average person. Love spells were not just the stuff of royal intrigue. They were desperate measures taken by people who sought to control something that was largely out of their hands. Whether successful or not, the very act of using magic to bind or influence love reflected a profound distrust in the natural course of human emotion and a desire to wrestle that control back. The idea of controlling love and affection, particularly through the use of magic, was so deeply ingrained in medieval society that it often blurred the lines between desire, desperation, and power. For the common folk, love spells were a way to create a chance at happiness in an unforgiving world. But for the powerful, love magic was often a means of reinforcing authority and ensuring loyalty, both in the private and political realms. The manipulation of affection wasn't just about romantic desire, it was about survival, social status, and sometimes even life or death. But for those not in positions of power, the consequences of love magic could be severe and often deeply unsettling. As we've already seen, people use love spells to try to secure a marriage, win the heart of a lover, or tie someone to them forever. But what about those who use love magic in more unsettling ways? What if the spell didn't bring love at all, but obsession, jealousy, or worse? When it comes to love magic, we can't ignore the darker side, the side that involved manipulation, control, and coercion. In many cases, love magic wasn't just about making someone fall in love with you. It was about keeping them there, at any cost. And that could lead to some horrifying consequences. Imagine being in a relationship where you had to stay, no matter how much you might want to break free. Your heart and mind may be telling you one thing, but a powerful spell has tied you to another person, whether you like it or not. One chilling example involves the use of binding spells, those designed not just to make someone love you, but to trap them in that love. These spells were incredibly dangerous. They often involved tying knots, braiding hair, and performing intricate rituals with the intent to ensure someone would never leave. The fear of abandonment in the medieval world was more than just emotional. It could have life-altering consequences. For women especially, the need to secure the loyalty of a man wasn't just a matter of romantic desire. It was a matter of social and financial stability. A binding spell could provide a sense of security, but at what cost? When these spells went wrong, the consequences could be catastrophic. Imagine a relationship based on a binding spell, on coercion, rather than mutual affection. It wouldn't just be emotionally toxic, it would be soul-crushing, knowing that the love you received wasn't freely given. For the person under the spell, the psychological toll would be immense. Love, after all, is supposed to be an act of free will, an exchange of emotions based on genuine affection. But when magic is involved, that love becomes tainted, artificial, constructed, even hollow. Some historians argue that the prevalence of love magic in the medieval period reflects the inability of people to cope with the uncertainties of life. The inability to control the outcomes of relationships, whether love or political alliances, drove people to resort to supernatural means. At the same time, the powerful influence of the church added a layer of complexity. On one hand, the church condemned magic, especially when it was seen as interfering with divine will. But on the other hand, the church also perpetuated the idea of a higher power controlling matters of love. After all, how could a common person find real love when divine will often stood in the way? The combination of divine influence, social inequality, and the fear of rejection created a perfect storm for the spread of love magic. People sought ways to force love to happen, to bend the universe to their desires, to make sure they would never be alone. Some turned to magical herbs and potions, others to symbolic gestures like wearing enchanted rings or writing love letters imbued with spells. Still, others performed complex rituals, often in the dead of night, calling upon forces both spiritual and earthly to create love where none existed. And let's not forget the role that fear played in these spells. Magic, especially the kind involving binding or vengeance, wasn't just about wanting love. It was about needing it. The fear of rejection, the fear of being alone, the fear of powerlessness, all these emotions could drive people to desperate lengths. This fear often overshadowed any sense of morality. And love magic became less about creating an authentic connection and more about survival in a harsh, unforgiving world. It was about not only securing your love life, but also protecting your social standing, your future, and even your life. Another angle that gets little attention is the role of revenge in medieval love magic. After all, love magic wasn't always about finding someone who didn't love you. Sometimes it was about getting back at someone who had wronged you. These revenge spells often involved curses designed to break up relationships, cause infidelity, or manipulate emotions to ensure that someone would feel the same heartache they had caused the caster. Take, for example, the infamous jealousy spells that were said to exist in certain parts of Europe. These were designed to create feelings of jealousy in a partner, hoping to make them so desperate for the caster's affection that they would return to them, or in some cases, break up with their current lover to be with the person performing the spell. In these cases, magic didn't create love, it distorted it, turning affection into an obsession. This sort of magic was often viewed with great suspicion, even in medieval times, because it was understood that manipulating emotions this way could have disastrous consequences for all involved. These manipulative practices were often dismissed as witchcraft, and the accused could face harsh penalties, ranging from banishment to execution. Historians still argue whether these practices were widespread or largely a product of folklore. But what's clear is that love magic's potential to cause harm was recognized even during the medieval period. Many magical practices were not about love at all, but about control. And the real danger in these practices wasn't just in the spells themselves, but in the effect they had on the hearts and minds of those who were caught in their web. The very essence of love, the idea that it should be freely given, was twisted beyond recognition, creating a world where affection was no longer a bond between two willing people, but a tool in a game of power, manipulation, and revenge. Love spells, then, were never just about creating something beautiful. They were about controlling something incredibly complex and unpredictable, and in doing so, people risked turning their deepest desires into something unrecognizable, into something darker and more dangerous than they ever could have imagined. As we explore further into the world of medieval love magic, it's clear that, for all its mystique and allure, this practice was rooted in a deep-seated fear of the unpredictable nature of love itself. People who resorted to love magic were often desperately trying to secure what was, for many, an unattainable or fragile commodity: genuine affection. In a world where love was often equated with survival, social, emotional, and even political, the stakes were high. But beyond the use of crocodile dung and complex incantations, love spells also held another more profound element: the belief that love was something that could and should be controlled. The fact that medieval society placed so much importance on relationships, particularly those formed by marriage, means that love spells had an undeniable practical dimension. They weren't just about romantic ideals, they were about status. A successful marriage could guarantee you a position in society, bring you wealth, and ensure you a future. If you weren't from a wealthy or noble family, securing love through magic might have seemed like the only viable way to create your own future. These spells, rituals, and potions were a means of exerting control over the randomness of love and marriage, which were otherwise dictated by class, politics, and inheritance. But let's pause and reflect on the ethical considerations that these love spells often raised. We've already touched on how love magic could be seen as a tool for controlling emotions, but there's another side to this: the idea that these magical practices were essentially a violation of someone's free will. If love was something that could be manipulated, if one person could change another's heart with a simple incantation, then what was left of the authenticity of love itself? Could real love exist if it was crafted through manipulation, through spells that bent another person's will to yours? It's a fundamental question that still haunts us today when we think about control in relationships. In the medieval context, there was also a cultural belief that love was connected to a person's soul. This belief only made love magic more powerful and dangerous. People didn't see love as a simple emotion that could be explained by biology or psychology. Instead, It was viewed as something that transcended the physical realm, something spiritual and divine. In this framework, a love spell wasn't just manipulating the heart of another person. It was seen as manipulating the soul, altering the essence of someone's being. But what happens when magic interferes with someone's soul? What happens when someone's heart is forced into a relationship it didn't choose? For the caster, the consequences of using love magic weren't always immediately obvious. Some spellcasters might have believed that their rituals worked to create happiness and devotion. After all, they wanted love to be pure and authentic. But if a spell was cast with selfish intent, desiring control over another's feelings, it could corrupt both the spellcaster's soul and the object of their affections. The imbalance of power in such relationships would inevitably lead to distrust, resentment, and often a tragic breakdown of whatever fragile connection had been forged. For some, the psychological consequences of love magic were as dangerous as the spells themselves. Consider someone who cast a spell to make another person love them. If the magic worked and the spell was successful, the emotional aftermath was often a profound disillusionment. Imagine waking up one day to realize that the person you loved, or who claimed to love you, wasn't really in love with you at all. They were instead bound by a magic they didn't choose, trapped in a cycle of manipulation. For the spellcaster, the power they held over someone else's heart often didn't lead to happiness. It led to an overwhelming fear of losing control. The once hopeful and joyful feeling of being loved became tainted by a knowledge that the affection wasn't genuine, that it wasn't the result of free will. And for those on the receiving end of these spells, the emotional toll was often even worse. Many people believed they were under the influence of forces they couldn't understand or control. They might not have been aware of the magic at first, but over time, they would feel a strange, almost unnatural connection to someone they might have otherwise never given a second glance. Their feelings of affection, loyalty, or even desire could begin to feel as though they were forced upon them, not chosen freely. And once someone started questioning the authenticity of their feelings, it became a slippery slope. How could you trust your emotions? How could you trust the person who had been the catalyst for all this confusion? Historians still argue whether love magic was primarily an expression of romantic yearning or a desperate act of power over one's circumstances. Some believe that it was simply a way for people to deal with the uncertainty of their social world, trying to assert some control over what was otherwise out of their hands. Others suggest that it was a more spiritual act, attempting to bend divine will to human desire, an act of devotion, if not manipulation. Regardless of its intent, though, love magic's long-lasting effects on relationships speak volumes about the psychological cost of seeking to control love through unnatural means. And yet, despite the potential dangers, love spells were far from uncommon. They were seen as a solution to many problems that couldn't be solved by simply waiting for love to come naturally. For a society so focused on status and power, love magic was one of the few tools available to alter the outcome of a situation. But by tampering with the forces of affection, people weren't just meddling in romantic matters. They were often meddling in their very souls. Perhaps this is where the legacy of medieval love magic lives on today. While we may no longer cast spells over candles or bury items in the ground, there is still a desire to control our relationships, sometimes to the point of manipulating our own emotions and the emotions of others. The idea that love can be manufactured, controlled, or forced is one that has persisted in modern times. Whether through technology, psychological manipulation, or even social media, the basic principles of love magic can still be found in many of our contemporary practices. The magic may have evolved, but the need to manipulate emotions, to bend them to our will, remains as strong as ever. So next time you find yourself thinking about the complexities of love, remember this: love spells, for all their bizarre rituals and sinister consequences, were driven by a very human need. A need to control, to ensure, and above all, to secure one's place in a world where love, true unshakable love, often seemed out of reach. Maybe that's why these spells, these incantations, and these rites continue to captivate our imaginations. In a world full of unpredictability, There's still something comforting about the idea that we could control love, even if it's only through the magic of our minds. As we move further into the murky waters of medieval love magic, we come to an interesting and perhaps unsettling reality: the widespread fear of being left unloved. In medieval society, where marriage was often not about romance but survival, the idea of losing love or being unloved could be devastating. And when you combine that with the belief that love was a force beyond human control, it becomes clear why people turn to magic to manipulate their romantic fates. But the practice of love magic wasn't just driven by the fear of loneliness. It was also deeply entwined with gender roles, expectations, and the power dynamics that shaped relationships during this time. In the medieval world, women were often seen as the weaker sex, subject to male authority in marriage, society, and sometimes even in their personal choices. This meant that women were frequently vulnerable when it came to securing love. For many women, love magic wasn't just a means of attraction. It was a way of ensuring that a husband or partner would stay loyal, or in some cases, that they would even marry at all. Women in medieval times had limited control over their romantic lives, especially if they were from lower social classes. Securing a good marriage was, in many cases, the only path to financial security, and the fear of being cast aside or left alone was ever present. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of medieval love magic was the way it often reflected women's powerless positions in society. Many love spells were designed not to make someone fall in love with the caster, but to trap them, ensuring they would stay and fulfill their obligations, whether that meant marriage or loyalty. For example, binding spells often came with the explicit goal of making a partner stay, a magic intended to protect women from the dangers of abandonment or betrayal. These binding spells, though, often had the opposite effect of the magic's intention. While the hope was to forge a loving, committed relationship, what usually resulted was a sense of entrapment, both for the woman casting the spell and the person on the receiving end of it. Can you imagine the emotional toll it would take to realize that the love you believed was freely given was, in fact, manipulated by another person? On the other hand, what must it have been like to be a woman in a time where your marriage prospects and social standing were entirely dependent on the whims of men? It's easy to see why medieval women, faced with such helplessness, would resort to using magic to gain some control over their own destinies. And yet, despite all these desperate measures, the consequences of using love magic could often be more damaging than the problems it aimed to solve. We've already touched on the psychological consequences of using magic to force someone to love you, but there's another aspect to consider: the impact on the person doing the casting. The need to constantly control another's affection could lead to a vicious cycle of insecurity, jealousy, and fear. Love magic wasn't just a way of obtaining affection, it was a way of becoming dependent on it. What happens when the person you force to love you stops responding to the magic? What happens when the illusion of control shatters and the very thing you sought to secure starts slipping away? The need for validation was especially strong in a time when marriage was the primary means of securing social standing. Women often used love magic as a way to protect themselves from the threat of being abandoned or forgotten, but in doing so, they were also participating in a culture that saw their worth in terms of their relationship status. Love spells, in this way, served as a form of protection, but also as a form of submission. They were not about the genuine, mutual love that we idealize today. They were about keeping a person bound, literally and figuratively, to you. Love magic became less about the heart and more about ownership, about making sure that no one else could take the person you desired. This sense of ownership wasn't just confined to relationships between men and women. It extended to relationships between people of all genders, especially when social expectations were involved. Medieval society had rigid ideas of who could love whom and who could express affection. Homosexuality, for example, was seen as a grave sin by the church and was punishable by death in some regions. But despite the legal and social restrictions, it's clear that love magic offered a certain degree of freedom for those who wished to express their feelings in secret. In places where same-sex love was forbidden, Magic became a way to navigate the consequences of expressing forbidden emotions. Love spells for same-sex attraction were often coded in subtle ways, passed along as secrets between lovers, because openly acknowledging these feelings could be dangerous. To be accused of witchcraft or using magic to unlawfully bind someone could result in the most extreme of punishments, execution. Therefore, the use of love magic was often a double-edged sword. While it offered a means of expression and control, it also brought with it the risk of severe consequences if discovered. The fear of exposure in this case was not just about society's judgment, but also about the supernatural ramifications of such practices. If someone was suspected of using magic to sway another person's heart, they could be accused of witchcraft, a charge that came with deadly consequences. Whether love magic was used to manipulate an unwilling lover or to express feelings that society would not permit, it was considered by many to be a dangerous art, one that walked a fine line between the sacred and the profane. Historians still debate whether love spells were widespread or whether they were largely a product of folklore and societal fears. Some argue that they were an essential part of medieval life, serving as a form of expression in a world where love could not always be freely chosen. Others suggest that love magic was simply a fantasy, a way for people to deal with the frustration and limitations of their relationships. Regardless of the extent to which love magic was practiced, one thing is clear. It served as a reflection of the deep fears people had about love, loss, and the consequences of manipulating human emotions. In a time when love was considered both a gift and a curse, the idea of controlling it through magic was a powerful, dangerous proposition. It allowed people to assert power over what should have been a free, mutual experience. But as we've seen throughout history, the attempts to control love often come with unpredictable and sometimes tragic consequences. We've delved into the strange and sometimes unsettling world of medieval love magic. And now, let's take a step back and reflect on its lasting impact. The concept of controlling love through spells, potions, and rituals, whether in the form of binding or seduction, wasn't just confined to the medieval period. It has left traces in folklore, popular culture, and even modern-day practices, where people continue to search for ways to make their relationships work, sometimes to extremes. Love magic, in many ways, is still with us, albeit in different forms. In the medieval era, magic was seen as a bridge between the mundane and the supernatural. It was part of everyday life for many, and the use of love magic was no exception. The idea that love could be harnessed, shaped, and controlled reflected a broader belief that everything in the universe was interconnected, and that it was possible to tap into hidden forces to get what you wanted. Whether through charms, rituals, or even the use of everyday objects like candles or rings, people believed they could influence the world around them and others' emotions by accessing these forces. While today's magic is more likely to be confined to fantasy novels or TV shows, the medieval mindset that magic could influence reality still lingers. Take the rise of self-help books, dating apps, and personal development tools aimed at making love happen or improving relationships. We might not be casting spells with candles or crocodile dung, but many modern practices, from online dating profiles to matchmaking services, can be seen as contemporary versions of the same impulse to control love. The tools and methods may have changed, but the underlying desire to force love to appear or to manipulate its course is remarkably similar to the ancient practice of using magic to achieve the same result. But beyond the superficial, there's also a deeper psychological component to this. Modern dating culture often emphasizes instant gratification, swiping left or right to find a potential partner. The desire for love and connection has become commodified, making people feel that they can easily choose or create love through a swipe, a text, or an image. In many ways, the modern obsession with finding love, particularly through the use of the self-help guides and love spells of modern origin, has a striking resemblance to the medieval approach of controlling love through supernatural means. There's a distinct fear of letting love come naturally, the same fear that medieval people had of leaving the fate of their hearts to chance. But even more disturbing, perhaps, is the way modern society's obsession with controlling love, whether through dating apps or matchmaking techniques can echo the manipulative tactics seen in medieval magic. When people try to force a connection, whether through a perfectly crafted profile or a carefully selected first message, they risk reducing love to a transaction, a manipulation of emotions and perceptions, instead of allowing it to be something that grows organically between two people. These tactics, so reminiscent of the binding spells and love potions of the medieval world, don't necessarily make love stronger or more genuine. Instead, they create a false sense of control over something that, by its very nature, cannot be controlled. In fact, modern technology has transformed the quest for love into an even more complex web of manipulation. Dating apps, with their algorithms designed to match you with someone compatible, make the process of finding love feel like a formula, a problem to be solved. And yet, despite all the tools and magic available, the reality is that love, true, deep love, remains unpredictable. In medieval times, the magic may have been seen as a way to assert control over a force that couldn't be tamed. Today, we may look at dating apps and algorithms in the same way, as modern-day spells that promise to conjure love. But in both cases, the essence of love remains elusive. Perhaps the greatest difference between medieval love magic and the modern pursuit of relationships is the lack of authenticity in today's methods. When people used magic in the past to win someone's affection, they were often acknowledging the power of love itself, even as they tried to control it. Whether they were binding someone's heart to theirs with a charm or using an incantation to make someone fall in love, they still believed that love was a powerful force, something that deserved to be respected and understood. But in today's culture, love has often been reduced to a series of clicks, swipes, and prepackaged profiles. We've created an environment where love feels like a product, a commodity to be marketed and sold. In medieval times, the act of using magic reflected a genuine yearning for connection. It reflected a need to be loved, to be seen, to find a bond that transcended the uncertainty of life. Today, that need is still there, but it's been transformed into an endless search for validation and control. The magic of love has been replaced by an endless cycle of likes and matches. And the more we try to control it, the more elusive love becomes. The shift in how we view love, from something deeply mystical and unpredictable to something that can be engineered and manufactured, also reflects the increasing commodification of human relationships. Just like medieval people used magic to control and manipulate love, today's culture encourages us to manufacture our ideal partners, to shape our relationships according to a set of expectations. The cost of this, however, is the authenticity and depth of the connection. Just as medieval love magic often led to hollow, controlling relationships, today's digital pursuit of love can lead to similar outcomes. Emotionally shallow connections based more on appearances and algorithmic compatibility than true emotional depth. In the end, the legacy of medieval love magic isn't just found in the historical accounts of spellcasting and potions, it lives on in our cultural obsession with controlling love. Whether through dating apps, self-help books, or magical thinking, we continue to seek ways to shape affection to our desires. But the more we try to control love, the more it slips through our fingers, as ephemeral as the magic itself. Maybe, just maybe, the greatest lesson we can take from medieval love magic is this: love can never be fully controlled. It's wild, unpredictable, and sometimes it's supposed to be. And no matter how many incantations we whisper or algorithms we use, true love remains something that we can only experience when we let it happen, naturally, without trying to force it. As we approach the end of our journey through the world of medieval love magic, it's clear that this practice was more than just a series of rituals and potions. It was a window into the human heart, revealing a deep yearning for control, security, and connection in a world that offered little in the way of certainty. Medieval people may have believed that magic could give them control over the most powerful force of all, love. But in reality, it was a reflection of their greatest fears and desires: fear of loneliness, fear of betrayal, and the desperate need to feel loved. Looking at this in the modern context, it's easy to dismiss the magic of the past as superstition, something that belongs only in dusty old books or Halloween horror stories. But in truth, the desire to control love is still very much alive today. The tools may have changed, but the underlying impulses remain the same. While we no longer cast spells with crocodile dung or chant in forgotten languages, we still find ways to manipulate the forces of attraction, whether through algorithms, dating apps, or self-help books on love. The concept of trying to make love happen, to manipulate someone's heart, is as modern as ever, even if the magic has taken on a different form. Take, for example, the vast industry surrounding matchmaking and relationship coaching. Today, professionals offer everything from dating advice to the science of attraction. There's a growing market for self-help books and apps that promise to solve the mystery of love. Some of these products claim to help you find your perfect match, while others offer more manipulative techniques for making someone fall in love with you. Some even claim to reveal the secret formulas behind successful relationships. Just like the love potions of old, these modern-day tools promise to give you control over something that, by nature, is unpredictable and uncontrollable. But much like medieval magic, these methods often come with unexpected consequences. If love can be manufactured, what happens to the authenticity of the connection between two people? What happens to the trust that forms the foundation of any lasting relationship? Magic, even when it's modern and digital, is still about power, about who has it and how it is used. If one person uses manipulative tactics to gain affection, or if love is reduced to a transaction, both parties risk losing something precious, the genuine, unspoken bond that can only come when love happens freely. What's also important to consider is the role that technology plays in shaping how we view and experience love today. Dating apps have turned love into a game of choice and convenience, where a match can be found at the touch of a button. It's easy to see the appeal. Who wouldn't want to be able to instantly find someone who seems perfect for them? But like medieval spells, dating apps provide an illusion of control, a belief that love can be engineered or fixed. And while the outcomes might be more immediate than a medieval incantation, they are no less fraught with the potential for misfire. The reality is that love can't be controlled in the way we often wish it could be. When we try to manipulate or force it, whether through ancient spells or modern techniques, we often end up distorting the natural flow of human connection. And the damage done when we manipulate someone's feelings or our own can have lasting consequences, often leaving us feeling unsatisfied, disillusioned, and in some cases, lonely. After all, love that's artificially crafted is rarely satisfying in the long term. It's always haunted by the question, is this real? And yet, the pull to control love remains incredibly strong. In a world where people increasingly feel disconnected, uncertain, and powerless, the idea that we can somehow influence love offers a comforting illusion of power. Love magic, whether in its medieval form or its modern counterpart, promises to make the unpredictable predictable, to turn the wild, uncontrollable force of human emotion into something manageable. But the truth is, love cannot be controlled by spells, potions, or algorithms. It's unpredictable, unruly, and often inconvenient, but that's what makes it so beautiful. So as we reflect on the magic of the past and the magic of today, perhaps the most valuable lesson we can take away is this. Love, in its truest form, is not something that can be coerced or forced. It can't be made to fit into a formula or tricked into submission. Instead, love is something that unfolds naturally, over time, often when we least expect it. When we stop trying to control it and instead allow it to happen on its own, we create the kind of love that is real, lasting, and ultimately fulfilling. In the end, the lesson from medieval love magic isn't just about how people try to manipulate others for their own benefit. It's about the enduring human desire for control, connection, and affection. But if there's one thing that remains clear, it's that no matter how hard we try to control it, love will always find a way to break free. Perhaps the greatest form of magic is simply letting love happen, naturally, freely, without trying to bind it to our will. After all, the best things in life are the ones that we can't control. As we reach the final stages of our exploration into the world of medieval love magic, it's worth reflecting on the broader cultural significance of these practices. Love magic wasn't just a personal pursuit. It was a communal and societal ritual, a means of navigating the complex emotional landscapes of a world steeped in uncertainty. By understanding the ways people turn to magic for love, we gain insight not only into medieval relationships, but also into the way human beings have always tried to solve the age-old problem of the heart: how to love and be loved, and what to do when things go awry. In the medieval period, relationships were often governed by necessity and survival. Unlike today, where romantic love is often seen as a personal choice or a source of self-fulfillment, love in the medieval world was often intertwined with social and political stability. Marriages were arranged, and love, if it was even a consideration, was a distant secondary concern. So, when people sought to manipulate love through magic, it wasn't just about personal desire. It was about finding a sense of security in a world where love was not always an easy or straightforward pursuit. For many, the idea of love spells was deeply connected to the fear of not having love, of being left out in a world where love often equaled survival. The role of the church in this equation is also fascinating. While the church condemned the use of magic and viewed it as heretical, it simultaneously offered a framework that emphasized the importance of love as a divine gift. The church's view of love was, of course, deeply intertwined with its teachings on marriage, chastity, and duty. For centuries, the ideal of courtly love became enmeshed with religious beliefs, blending the notion of spiritual devotion with the human longing for affection. The church, while warning against the use of magic to manipulate love, also provided the social structure that reinforced the idea that love, and the quest for love, was central to human life. This duality, between the sacred and the profane, between divine love and human desire, formed a deep tension in medieval society. On one hand, people were taught that love was a gift from God, a force to be revered and respected. On the other, they lived in a world where love was often out of reach, and magic seemed like a possible shortcut. The church's insistence on the purity and sanctity of love could easily feel like a contradiction when faced with the everyday realities of life, which were filled with hardship and struggle. If love was sacred, why was it so elusive? Why, if love was a divine blessing, did so many people find it so difficult to obtain? The belief that love could be controlled and manipulated through magic was in many ways an attempt to reconcile these two conflicting ideas. People wanted to believe that love, in all its forms, romantic, familial, or spiritual, was within their grasp, that they could shape their destiny and find the affection they craved. But in seeking to control love, they risked undermining its true nature. After all, love is something that can't be forced. It can only be given and received freely, a gift that is best shared without expectation or manipulation. Looking at the practices of medieval love magic today, we see that while the specific methods have changed, the underlying motivations have remained remarkably consistent. The desire to control love, to make it happen on our terms, is still very much present in modern relationships. Whether it's through social media, dating apps, or even self-help books, the desire to make love work is still a driving force in how we navigate our romantic lives. But just as medieval people discovered, attempting to force love through external means often leaves us with an empty shell, a hollow version of what could have been something genuine and beautiful. Perhaps one of the most sobering truths about love magic is that no matter how powerful the spells or how carefully crafted the rituals, love that is manipulated or forced is never truly fulfilling. The medieval world, with all its rituals and rites, provides a perfect lesson for us today. Love can't be controlled, and when we try to, we risk distorting it beyond recognition. Authentic love, the kind that sustains us through life's trials, is not something that can be conjured with magic. It grows naturally, often unexpectedly, and requires patience, vulnerability, and trust. The enduring fascination with love magic, both in the past and today, can be traced to a universal truth. Love is central to our lives, and yet it is also elusive. The search for love and the attempt to control it has shaped human history in ways that we are only beginning to understand. We still turn to external forces, whether magic, technology, or social norms, in an attempt to secure what seems so difficult to obtain. But in doing so, we risk missing the point of love itself, that it is something to be experienced, to be given freely, and to be received without expectation. Perhaps, then, the greatest lesson we can learn from medieval love magic is this. True love cannot be manipulated or manufactured. It is not a spell to be cast or an outcome to be engineered. It is a gift, fragile, fleeting, and yet incredibly powerful when it happens naturally. The more we try to control love, the more we push it away. Only by letting go, by allowing love to grow at its own pace, can we experience its deepest, most fulfilling forms. As we close our exploration of medieval love magic, let's remember this. The love that truly lasts, the love that transforms lives, is not the result of spells, potions, or carefully calculated formulas. It is the love that arises from vulnerability, trust, and the willingness to let go of control. And, like the magic of the past, it remains one of life's greatest mysteries, no matter how much we try to understand or manipulate it. As we near the conclusion of our journey into the world of medieval love magic, it becomes clear that the search for love, affection, and connection is as old as human history itself. Whether through spells, rituals, or desperate attempts to control the forces of attraction, people in the medieval era shared a common human struggle with us today: the desire to feel loved, to connect with others, and to secure a future built on mutual affection. Love, then and now, remains an intensely personal pursuit, one that shapes our identities and drives much of our behavior. What's particularly fascinating, however, is how much these medieval practices reveal about the universal human condition. The desperate need to control love, whether by invoking the powers of the supernatural or through clever manipulation, speaks to a deep-seated fear. The fear of not being loved, of being abandoned, and of failing to connect with others in a meaningful way. This was true in medieval society, where marriage and affection could determine your future, as it is in our modern world, where we often use technology, social media, and dating apps to control or shape our relationships in ways that are sometimes more about validation than genuine connection. The medieval world believed in the power of magic to influence emotions and outcomes. Spells, charms, and rituals were woven into the fabric of daily life as people attempted to bend the forces of love to their will. In some ways, this was a reflection of the uncertainty people faced in their romantic lives. In a society where love could bring both blessings and ruin, the idea of controlling or manipulating love through magical means must have seemed like a practical solution. It was a way to hedge against rejection, to ensure that the object of one's affections didn't slip away into the arms of another, or to secure a future that wasn't left to chance. But what strikes us today, looking back, is how these ancient practices echo the emotional insecurity we often feel in modern life. Despite the advancements in society, the rise of digital platforms for connecting with others, and the broadening of romantic possibilities, the fear of being unloved remains just as potent now as it was in the medieval period. We still search for ways to make love happen on our terms. Dating apps are our modern-day love potions, promising to bring us closer to our ideal partner, much like the medieval spells that promise to capture the heart of a lover. Yet the similarities end there. The rise of dating apps and algorithms represents a shift in how love is pursued, more clinical, more structured, and often impersonal. The idea that we can control who we fall in love with, or who falls in love with us, is a reflection of our ongoing desire to engineer connection. And while these modern tools may give us an illusion of control, they also reduce love to a product, something to be bought, marketed, and measured. Unlike the medieval magic that was infused with mystical belief, modern dating platforms often feel more transactional, relying on profiles, pictures, and compatibility scores to determine who we should be with. In some ways, we've traded the mystery of love for the certainty of matches and swipes. But here's the catch. While love magic may have been steeped in superstition, its practitioners weren't wrong about one thing. Love is powerful, and it can't be easily controlled. Whether you're a medieval sorcerer or a modern-day dater, trying to force love can often lead to unexpected consequences. The very nature of love means that it can't be coerced or manufactured, no matter how much magic or modern technology we apply to it. The ultimate lesson that both medieval love magic and today's dating landscape teach us is that love is an unpredictable force. It can't be captured, controlled, or forced into being. No matter how many candles we burn or apps we download, The magic of love lies in its spontaneity, in its willingness to grow without our interference. Love, whether through medieval rituals or modern-day profiles, is a reflection of our deepest needs and desires. But it also holds something essential, the ability to surprise us, to appear when we least expect it, and to transform our lives in ways we cannot foresee. As we look back at the history of love magic and its place in the medieval world, it's important to remember that the quest for love was always more than just an individual pursuit. It was a cultural and social force, one that shaped the lives of individuals, families, and communities. And while the tools people used may have been strange or even absurd, whether through crocodile dung or enchanted talismans, the underlying impulse remains universal. The search for connection, for affection, and for the reassurance that love is not only real, but something we can have a hand in. In the end, medieval love magic teaches us something fundamental about the human experience. Love is never fully ours to control. It will come when it is ready, in ways we cannot predict, and it is often the most authentic love that arrives without force, without manipulation, and without the constraints of magic or technology. The best relationships, like the most meaningful forms of love magic, are those that come naturally, when we are open to the possibilities, when we let go of control, and when we let love find us, rather than chasing after it with rituals and spells. As we close this chapter on the fascinating world of medieval love magic, let's take a moment to reflect on our own relationship with love. Whether it's in the realm of magic, modern romance, or personal connections. Perhaps the greatest magic of all is the ability to let love unfold on its own, without trying to force it into a mold, without trying to make it conform to our expectations. After all, love, in its truest form, is a powerful force that cannot be contained or manipulated. It's only when we let it be free that it can truly work its magic. As we continue our exploration of medieval love magic and its echoes in the modern world, it's fascinating to consider how these ancient practices were rooted in both superstition and deep emotional truths. Love magic, despite its often bizarre and disturbing methods, was fundamentally about one thing: the human desire for connection, understanding, and affection. It wasn't just about spells and potions. It was about fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and the overwhelming desire to be loved in a world that offered little stability or predictability. This human desire for control over love wasn't exclusive to the medieval period. It's a thread that runs through the history of human relationships. From the ancient rituals of the Greeks and Romans, to the medieval love spells, and even to today's more modern-day approaches to finding and maintaining relationships, the quest for love has always been about more than just attraction. It's about power, influence, and at times, desperation. In many ways, these medieval love spells reflect the universal struggle to conquer the uncontrollable nature of love, a force that has shaped human life for millennia. What's striking, however, is how these medieval practices viewed love as something external, a force that could be bent, shaped, or controlled. If you were lonely, desperate for affection, or simply in need of security, magic was seen as a tool to manipulate fate, to make the person you desired fall in love with you. Yet, as we've learned through the course of our exploration, love that is manufactured or coerced is rarely fulfilling. The person who is bound to you through a spell or charm may love you in the sense that they feel compelled to, but their affection is not freely given. It's a hollow imitation of the genuine connections that come from mutual respect, understanding, and most importantly, trust. Today, while we may not be casting spells with candles and herbs, we still rely on external means to find love. In a world where everything from our meals to our jobs is optimized by technology, it's only natural that we'd attempt to optimize love as well. Dating apps, matchmaking services, and even social media have all become ways for us to control our romantic fates, to force connections that might never happen naturally. But these tools, much like the medieval love spells, often come with unintended consequences. Just as medieval love magic created a distortion of affection, modern dating culture can sometimes lead to shallow connections, emotional manipulation, and a lack of authenticity in our relationships. The modern obsession with controlling love through technology highlights a critical aspect of human behavior: the desire for certainty. Unlike the medieval world, where life was uncertain due to factors like war, disease, and famine, today's world offers a new kind of instability, emotional instability. We now live in a time when personal happiness, particularly in the realm of love, is often tied to external validation. Our romantic worth is quantified by likes, swipes, and matches, each interaction potentially validating or undermining our sense of self. In many ways, we have replaced the medieval belief in supernatural control with a digital version of the same thing. Technology may seem like an improvement over spells and potions, but it's still a way of trying to manipulate and control something that, by nature, cannot be controlled: human affection. And just as in medieval times, when love spells went wrong, when they backfired or caused unintended harm, our modern pursuit of controlled love often leads to emotional turbulence. Relationships born from algorithms or forced connections may spark for a moment, but they rarely stand the test of time. In the same way that medieval spells created false bonds, modern dating platforms often result in fleeting relationships that fail to deepen into true emotional intimacy. The more we attempt to manufacture love, the more it eludes us. Perhaps the most significant lesson we can draw from both medieval love magic and modern dating culture is the inherent unpredictability of love. No matter how much we try to control it, shape it, or bend it to our will, love cannot be forced. True love is a delicate, organic thing. It cannot be conjured or engineered. It grows slowly, nurtured by time, patience, and shared experiences. Whether through ancient spells or modern swipes, the attempt to rush love or manipulate it into being often leads to disappointment because it overlooks the essential nature of love. It must be freely given. The appeal of medieval love magic, much like the allure of modern dating apps, is rooted in the fear of vulnerability. People sought control because they feared being left behind, rejected, or unloved. But in doing so, they compromised the authenticity of their relationships. When you control love, you risk losing the very thing that makes it meaningful: its spontaneity, its mutuality, and its capacity to surprise. By trying to bind someone's heart to yours, whether with magic or algorithms, you reduce love to an exchange of power, rather than a genuine connection between equals. The medieval love spell might have been a misguided attempt to control the uncontrollable, but it also reflected a deep-seated desire to experience love, to belong, and to share life with someone else. The emotional core of these rituals was not evil, it was human. It's the same desire that drives us today, as we search for partners who fulfill our needs, soothe our anxieties, and provide us with affection. What's changed is not the underlying need for love, but the means by which we try to attain it. As we move forward, it's worth reflecting on how we approach love in our own lives. Are we seeking genuine connections, or are we simply trying to fit love into an equation that will give us the results we want? Are we allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, open, and free in our relationships, or are we attempting to control them, afraid of the uncertainty they bring? The medieval world may have relied on spells and charms to secure love, but the true magic of love lies in our ability to let go, to trust, to be vulnerable, and to let love unfold naturally. Perhaps, after all, the greatest lesson we can learn from medieval love magic is that love cannot and should not be controlled. It is not a force to be tamed or manipulated, but something to be nurtured, shared, and experienced without expectation. In the end, the most powerful form of love magic is simply the act of giving love freely and receiving it in return, without trying to mold it into something it's not. Now that we've peeled back the layers of medieval love magic, explored its fascinating rituals, and considered how these practices resonate with our own modern-day approach to relationships, it's time to look at the emotional core that connects the two: vulnerability. Both in the medieval era and today, the central motivation behind love spells and attempts to manipulate love was rooted in a profound fear of being vulnerable. Whether you were a noblewoman seeking to secure your marriage or a modern dater swiping for the perfect match, the underlying impulse is the same: a desire to avoid the pain of rejection, the hurt of loneliness, and the terror of emotional exposure. In the medieval world, love spells were, in many ways, an attempt to shield oneself from the raw uncertainty of love. By invoking magic, people hope to create certainty in their relationships. A spell could serve as a protective barrier against the chaos of the human heart, offering the caster a semblance of control in a world full of social and emotional unpredictability. But what the spellcasters didn't realize was that in trying to control love, they were in fact denying themselves the freedom and authenticity that true affection demands. The same is true today. Modern dating apps, with their meticulously crafted profiles and compatibility algorithms, offer an illusion of control over the unpredictable nature of romance. The more information we feed into these platforms, the more we hope to narrow down the mystery of love and transform it into something quantifiable. By selecting certain traits, matching with people who meet certain criteria, we attempt to remove the chance, the spontaneity, and yes, the vulnerability from the equation. We become data scientists of our own romantic lives, believing that love can be engineered with the right inputs. However, no matter how much we try to structure our romantic destinies, love always retains its elusive and unpredictable nature. Much like the medieval love magic, modern approaches to romance attempt to harness a force that cannot be contained. The paradox is that the more we try to control love, the less we seem to understand it, and the more we risk losing the magic that makes it so meaningful in the first place. The ability to surprise, to evolve, and to grow between two people in a genuine connection. This struggle for control over love speaks to a larger truth about the human condition. We often fear vulnerability, yet vulnerability is the key to authentic connection. Just as medieval love magic was an attempt to gain control over affection to avoid the pain of rejection, so too do we often try to shield ourselves from the vulnerability of truly opening up to another person. In today's world, where loneliness and emotional isolation are ever-present struggles, the desire to avoid emotional risk is stronger than ever. But if there's one thing that both medieval and modern attempts to manipulate love teach us, it's that real emotional connection can only thrive in an environment of trust, vulnerability, and openness. We cannot force love. We cannot bind someone's heart with a spell or algorithm and expect it to grow into something meaningful. True intimacy requires risk, the risk of rejection, of heartache, of disappointment. But it is through these risks that we also find the deep joy, companionship, and love that we long for. In the medieval world, people sought certainty in their relationships through magic because they feared the unpredictability of love. But in doing so, they stripped away the very essence of what makes love so powerful, its ability to grow and change without constraint. In the same way, modern dating systems, despite their best intentions, often attempt to lock people into categories that limit real emotional connection. When we reduce love to a set of criteria, whether it's a personality test, a list of shared interests, or a perfect match, we risk losing the spontaneity and serendipity that can make love so unexpected and transformative. In the end, the most important lesson that love magic, both medieval and modern, teaches us is that vulnerability is not a weakness. Rather, it is the foundation of meaningful relationships. To truly connect with another person, we must allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to expose our true selves, to risk being hurt. The medieval magicians, despite their attempts to force love into existence, were ultimately trying to avoid the very thing that makes love authentic, the willingness to open up and take emotional risks. But how do we find the courage to be vulnerable? How can we learn to trust in love without trying to control it? It's a question that both medieval spellcasters and modern daters struggled with, and still do. The fear of rejection is real, and it can be paralyzing. But the beauty of love lies in its unpredictability, its ability to surprise us when we least expect it. Perhaps the true magic of love is not in trying to make it happen, but in learning to let go and allow it to find us, as vulnerable as we are. One way to start embracing vulnerability is to stop viewing love as something that needs to be won or conquered through magical means. Instead, we can begin to see love as a natural, organic process, something that unfolds as we open ourselves to the possibility of connection. When we let go of the need to control every aspect of our romantic lives, we make space for authentic, lasting relationships to emerge. And just like the medieval spells of the past, the true magic of love will reveal itself, not in the control we exert over it, but in the freedom we give it to grow. So as we wrap up our exploration of medieval love magic, let's keep this in mind. Love can never be forced. The spells, potions, and algorithms may promise us control, but they cannot give us the authenticity and emotional richness that come from embracing vulnerability. Real love requires risk, openness, and trust, and only when we are willing to be vulnerable, to give ourselves fully to another person, can we truly experience the magic of connection. At this point, we've peeled back the layers of medieval love magic, explored its often unsettling practices, and even considered how it has bled into the modern-day search for love. But as we continue to reflect on the lessons we've learned from these ancient rituals, we should also think about how the desire to control love has shaped the very way we relate to one another. The deeper we go into history, the more we realize that this isn't just a story about ancient spells or medieval superstition. It's about our persistent human need to connect, to feel loved, and to make sure that love, once found, doesn't slip away. One of the most striking aspects of medieval love magic was the intense focus on the act of securing love. Spells were designed not just to create affection, but to cement it, to tie hearts together in a way that would make them impervious to time, hardship, or the fickleness of human emotions. These rituals weren't merely about the chemistry of attraction. They were about stability, control, and assurance. Imagine casting a spell on someone you love, hoping that the magic will protect your relationship from the trials of life. The idea of sealing your love with a binding spell is essentially saying, I want to keep this, no matter what happens. In many ways, this desire to ensure love mirrors the ways we approach relationships today. Think about the ways people now attempt to secure love in our modern world. From engagements that promise forever, to social media posts that broadcast our perfect relationships, to the use of dating apps that promise to find us the one, we continue to engage in acts that try to lock down love. But what we often forget is that love, whether in the medieval era or in the present, doesn't thrive on control or security. It thrives on freedom, trust, and growth. This brings us to the next important insight from our journey into the history of love magic, the paradox of control. The more people try to control love, the more they risk losing it. In medieval times, people believed that through their magic, they could ensure that their love would be constant, unwavering, and protected from external threats. But love, when manipulated through spells, loses the very qualities that make it so powerful: its spontaneity, its unpredictability, and its ability to evolve naturally. Modern society, with its apps, guides, and self-help books on relationships, reflects a similar drive to control love, to ensure that it remains secure and unchanging. And yet, the more we try to mold love, the more we risk trapping it in a box, unable to breathe or grow. True love, as counterintuitive as it may seem, thrives on the opposite of control. It flourishes when two people are willing to let go of their need to dictate how love should unfold. Instead of trying to manufacture affection or ensure permanence, love grows best when it is allowed to evolve at its own pace, when people are open to each other without the pressure of perfection. Love, at its core, is about acceptance. Accepting the unpredictability of human connection, allowing for change, and understanding that love isn't a force to be tamed, but a mystery to be embraced. The historical longing to secure love through magic reveals something about the human psyche that remains true even today: our desire for certainty in an uncertain world. Love, by nature, is unpredictable. People come into our lives in ways we cannot foresee, and relationships take twists and turns that we can't control. In a world full of uncertainty, we yearn for the assurance that love will remain constant, that it will not vanish when we least expect it. But as history shows us, and as modern experience continues to prove, love is never something we can fully control. And perhaps that's what makes it so special. By trying to control love through spells or algorithms, we miss out on the deeper, richer connections that arise when we are willing to be vulnerable, when we let go of the need to make things work and simply let them be. Modern dating apps, with their swipeable profiles and compatibility tests, may promise to bring us the ideal partner, but they also risk distilling love down to a set of variables. And when we rely too heavily on external forces to create relationships, we lose the magic of love itself. True love isn't a series of steps or a perfect set of criteria. It's a living, breathing connection that grows and changes, unpredictable yet beautiful in its imperfections. Now, as we shift our focus back to medieval magic, let's consider something else that's fascinating: the cultural and social power of love magic. Love spells weren't just personal rituals, they were also a reflection of the societal norms and expectations of the time. Who had access to love magic? Who was allowed to use it, and why? The answer often depended on one's position in society. In medieval times, women, especially those from lower classes, had limited social power, and love magic was one of the few ways they could exert influence over their romantic fates. For men, especially those in power, love magic was often used not to secure affection, but to manipulate others for political gain. The power dynamics at play in medieval love magic mirror the dynamics of modern relationships, where power, influence, and status can play a role in determining who gets to love and be loved. In today's world, we still see the intersection of love, power, and control, albeit in different forms. The widespread use of social media has created new power structures, where relationships, love, and attraction are often influenced by external validation. People constantly curate their lives to present a specific image, often shaping how others perceive their romantic connections. Much like medieval magic, modern tools can shape how we relate to one another, presenting us with an image of love that may not be entirely authentic. It's an image shaped by filters, captions, and likes, much like the medieval spells that filtered the genuine connection of two people into something that was more about control than affection. So, how do we break free from these modern-day spells that trap us into viewing love as something that can be engineered or manipulated? It starts by allowing ourselves to experience love as it is, not as we wish it to be. It requires us to relinquish control, to trust in the process of getting to know another person without trying to mold them into our ideal. True love doesn't need to be fixed or forced. It needs to be nurtured with patience, openness, and trust. This brings us back to the central theme of our exploration into love magic. The desire to control love is ultimately a futile one. Whether in the medieval era or today, love is unpredictable and uncontrollable. The best relationships are those that happen without manipulation, those that unfold naturally when two people are ready to take the leap into vulnerability and acceptance. So, as we let go of our need to control love, we open ourselves to the kind of love that is authentic, lasting, and most importantly, free. As we wrap up our journey through the intricate world of medieval love magic and its impact on modern romance, there's one last question we must ponder. How do we, as individuals living in an age of constant connectivity and digital algorithms, reclaim the authenticity and magic of love that medieval spellcasters once sought to control? The search for love, connection, and affection isn't new, and it remains as powerful today as it was centuries ago. However, the difference lies in our understanding of it and how we approach the task of finding it. Let's start by acknowledging the inherent humanity of our desire to love and be loved. Whether you lived in the medieval period, the Victorian era, or today, the need for deep emotional connection is universal. People in the medieval world didn't have the distractions and conveniences we enjoy today. No smartphones or social media to distract them from their emotional needs. But, much like us, they turned to magic because they wanted a certainty they couldn't find elsewhere in their lives. Their love spells were a reflection of the same desire we have today, the need for love to be guaranteed, for emotional validation, for intimacy without the messiness of vulnerability. Yet what makes love so beautiful is its messiness. It is unpredictable, illogical, and untamed, as we've seen throughout this exploration of medieval love magic. The medieval desire to harness that force and make it obedient, whether through rituals, incantations, or enchanted objects, was ultimately an attempt to avoid the messiness of love, to sidestep the risk of heartache and the vulnerability that comes with letting someone into your heart. This, in turn, created a distortion of the very thing they sought, love that is genuine, shared, and free. In today's world, we still struggle with the same desire for certainty in love. We want love that is safe, love that won't leave us vulnerable. Dating apps, with their swipes and profile matches, attempt to provide that certainty. Algorithms are designed to maximize compatibility, often leaving out the unpredictability that makes love so dynamic and exciting. Relationships that begin on these platforms may seem more controlled, more predictable, but do they feel real? Do they allow for the messiness and imperfection that make love so rewarding? The crux of the issue lies in the balance between control and freedom. Control gives us a sense of security, but freedom allows for growth. Relationships born from genuine unforced connection evolve over time, often in ways we never anticipated. In the same way that medieval spells tried to solidify affection, we too may try to solidify the foundation of our relationships with external tools, like dating apps or social expectations. But the most meaningful love comes when we let go of these external attempts and allow the bond to grow naturally, without artifice. One might argue that dating apps are just a modern form of medieval love magic, only with a different set of tools. Where medieval people used herbs, potions, and incantations, we now use filters, profiles, and algorithms to craft the perfect image of ourselves and find the perfect match. But just as medieval magic often failed to create lasting connections, so too do many of our modern attempts at controlling love lead to relationships that feel hollow or short-lived. It's important to remember that love is not about finding the perfect match. There's no magic spell, app, or formula that can guarantee that someone will love you or that you will love them in return. Love is messy, unpredictable, and sometimes frustrating, but it is also the force that pushes us to grow as individuals, to learn, and to open ourselves to new possibilities. When we embrace love without the need for control or perfection, we allow it to transform us in ways that we couldn't anticipate. In medieval times, the act of casting a love spell was, in part, an attempt to remove the risk of rejection and vulnerability. But it was this very vulnerability, this willingness to open up, that ultimately leads to the kind of love we all crave. Love cannot exist without vulnerability. It cannot exist without trust, and trust cannot be built when we try to control every outcome. In the modern world, as we continue to search for love in a world that is increasingly digitized and curated, we must learn to be more comfortable with uncertainty. The idea of swiping for the perfect partner or relying on a set of predetermined criteria may offer a sense of control, but it also robs us of the joy that comes from truly discovering someone. Relationships are not built on algorithms or comparisons. They are built on shared experiences, unexpected connections, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. Perhaps the most important lesson we can draw from both medieval love magic and modern dating practices is this: love in all its forms is not something to be controlled or manufactured. It is something to be experienced, something to be discovered in its rawest form, even when it's imperfect. The more we try to control love, the more we distance ourselves from the very thing we seek. Love that is forced, bound, or manipulated, whether by spells or swipes, can never live up to the deep connection that happens when we open ourselves fully to the unpredictable beauty of another person. The medieval world may have used magic to try to control love, but the true magic of love is found in letting go. It's in being willing to be vulnerable, to take risks, and to trust that the people we meet and the relationships we cultivate are part of a larger, mysterious process that we cannot predict or control. The true magic of love is not in casting spells or creating formulas. It's in the raw, imperfect, beautifully messy connections that form when we allow ourselves to be seen, fully and completely, by another person. As we look to the future of relationships, we must remember that love is not a thing to be owned or controlled. It is a gift, a force that transcends time, place, and circumstance. And while we can't control love, we can cultivate it by embracing its unpredictable, uncontrollable beauty. By doing so, we open ourselves to the most profound magic of all, the kind of love that grows naturally, deeply, and freely. As we come to the final chapter of our journey through medieval love magic, let's pause for a moment to reflect on the wisdom hidden in those ancient rituals and practices. After all, the magic people once relied on to control love wasn't just about spells, potions, or incantations. It was about something much deeper, a desire to understand love, to harness it, and to make it certain in a world that felt so full of unpredictability. Just as we find ourselves seeking security and certainty in our love lives today, people in the medieval world were no different. They turned to magic as a way of gaining some semblance of control over something that seemed to be beyond their grasp. We've seen how love magic operated, how it took many forms, from creating potions with herbs and animal parts to invoking powerful deities to bring about affection. The rituals weren't just about attracting a partner, though. They were also about holding on to love, about making it endure, about making sure it would never slip away. The medieval world, much like ours today, was filled with the need to protect and control relationships. In a time when survival often depended on marriage and social alliances, love wasn't just a matter of romantic desire. It was an economic and social tool. Securing the right partner could mean financial security, status, and protection from the many dangers that lurked outside. Yet, as we look back at these practices, it's clear that the more people tried to control love, the more they created distance between themselves and the true nature of it. Love is a wild thing. It can't be bound by a spell or confined to the expectations we set for it. It doesn't adhere to rules or timelines. It comes and goes on its own terms, moving in unexpected ways and changing people in profound, life, sometimes unsettling ways. The magic of love isn't in the manipulation of its course. It's in its freedom, its unpredictability, and its ability to surprise us. Fast forward to the present, and we see how much we still struggle with the same fears of uncertainty in love. In today's world, we have dating apps, compatibility tests, and relationship coaches to guide us. We've created systems and algorithms to try to make love more predictable, more controlled. But just like the medieval spellcasters, we're still trying to solve a problem that cannot be solved. Love cannot be reduced to a list of traits or a checklist of qualities. It can't be guaranteed or manufactured, no matter how many profiles we swipe through or how many formulas we read. The problem lies in our desire for certainty. We want to know that love will last, that it will remain stable, and that it won't slip away when we need it most. But the truth is, love isn't meant to be controlled. It can't be held in place. The more we try to make it conform to our expectations, the more we risk losing it. Love thrives in the spaces between certainty and uncertainty, between predictability and surprise. When we try to control love, we forget that it's meant to be free. It's meant to evolve, to change, and sometimes to surprise us. When we let go of the need to control love, that's when we open ourselves up to the real magic. We allow ourselves to be vulnerable, to accept that we cannot predict what will happen, but that we can experience love in its most genuine form. Just like the medieval people who, despite all their magic, could not control the ebb and flow of affection, we too must come to terms with the fact that love will not always be what we expect. It may not fit our plans or timelines, but it will find us when we are open to it. And when it does, it will be richer, deeper, and more meaningful than any carefully planned formula we could have created. Now, imagine yourself in a space where love doesn't have to be controlled. Picture a world where love isn't something you chase after or force into being, but something that comes to you naturally, effortlessly. Imagine the peace that comes with knowing that love, like a river, will flow in its own time and direction, regardless of your attempts to direct it. Imagine the joy of simply being open to whatever form love may take, without the need to manipulate or force it. The real magic of love is found not in our attempts to control it, but in our willingness to let it unfold naturally. As you sit with these thoughts, let yourself embrace the idea that love isn't a burden to be borne or a task to be completed. It is a gift to be experienced, to be welcomed, to be cherished as it is, not as we wish it to be. The more we try to control it, the more we miss out on its true essence. Love is about connection, vulnerability, and growth, not about forcing a connection into something it was never meant to be. And as you settle into the quiet of this moment, know that love will find you when you are ready for it. There's no need to rush, no need to force. It will come to you naturally when you least expect it, and it will be everything you need it to be. Now, take a deep breath and allow the warmth of this thought to settle within you. Let go of any worries, any pressure you may feel about love and relationships. All is well, and everything will unfold in its own time. Just as the medieval spellcasters tried to control love, We too often forget that love doesn't need to be controlled. It simply needs to be allowed to grow. Relax and surrender to the idea that love is something that will find its way to you in its own time without the need for force. Take a slow, deep breath, and as you exhale, let your body relax into the calm of this moment. As we reach the end of our journey, let go of any tension or stress that may have built up throughout the day. Let the soft weight of the present moment settle over you, as the knowledge that love will come when it's meant to rest gently in your mind. There is no rush. There is no pressure. Love, in all its beautiful and unpredictable forms, will find you when you're ready, naturally and without force. The magic of love is not something to be controlled or predicted. It flows like a quiet river, finding its own path and carrying us where we need to go. Let this thought wash over you like a gentle wave, soothing your mind and easing your body into a place of peace. Feel the weight of the world slip away as you surrender to the comfort of knowing that love will unfold on its own, without the need for intervention. Now, as you settle into the softness of this moment, imagine love as a soft breeze, unseen but felt deeply. It moves at its own pace, finding its way to those who are open to it. Trust that love will come to you when it is meant to. And with that thought, let yourself drift into a deep, peaceful rest. There's no need to chase it. There's no need to manipulate it. Love will find its way to you in its own time, gently, softly, and beautifully. Feel your body relax, your mind at ease, and your heart open to the possibilities. Let love's natural magic embrace you in the quiet of this moment. Rest, knowing all is well.